In a world filled with challenges and opportunities, it's not just about having big dreams, it's about having the right approach to turn those dreams into reality. Whether you're navigating the competitive landscape of business or seeking personal growth, it's all about the approach.
And welcome to our latest episode of The Approach. I'm your host, Dr. Davis McAlister. We call this show The Approach because when I worked in military intelligence, our success and failure depended on taking the right approach. And on this show, we discuss aspects of leadership and problem solving and the approaches that have made our guests successful. My guest today is Devin Schubert. He is an internationally acclaimed coach, speaker, international best-selling author, and multiple award-winning entrepreneur. His journey to success has been nothing short of remarkable, and it is evidenced by his appearance in 2 reality TV shows for entrepreneurs, where he stood out among over 100,000 applicants. In addition to his television success, Devin is a prolific coach after launching his Influence Academy, imparting cutting-edge strategies and transformative wisdom, being influential, especially through social media and stages. Sharing stages with greats like Eric Thomas, Pat Quinn, and Willie Robertson are just a few of his memorable moments. His new show called School of Influence goes right along with his mission to help 1 million people share their stories across media in his legacy project called Stories to Stages. None of this compares to his personal journey of adopting 3 children, which highlights his profound dedication to transforming lives, both professionally and at home. And without further ado, let's welcome to the stage, Devin. Thank you for coming. It is truly an honor to have you on.
What really matters is that they remember who you are.
Yeah.
And I hope that today we can be able to get that out to people of recognizing that all these things are great, but the number one thing is being a father.
Yeah, it's awesome. I've got 5 kids myself, and some of them have been mine biologically, and some of them are not, but they are still mine.
Amen.
So I read your bio, but please break down who Devin is. Where did you come from, and how did you get where you're at?
Yeah, I was born here in the Midwest. I live in the state of Iowa. I'm putting Iowa on the map because most people have no idea. We're not the potatoes. That's Idaho. We're not Ohio. We're Iowa. If you look out my window, it's cornfields. It's what we do. We enjoy the freedom of cornfields here. The biggest thing that I feel like has identified myself has been I've helped plant 7 churches. I've helped start 9 different ministries. I was a social worker for 15 years, and I recognized that the government had some issues when it came to child welfare, and especially the foster care system and things like that. So I started a foster care system through the churches and got it legalized across the state of Iowa. I traveled and trained all facilities across the state of Iowa for restraint holds and working with troubled youth. Started a couple of moving companies, and we built them up to 7 figures, and it was great. Have 3 adopted children, all these different things about who I am and what the identity is inside of me. I would say, according to, alongside with what you have going on here with the approach, is the approach that I've used is storytelling. It is who am I and how can I change? How can I utilize the story is inside of me, all the different things in my life, be able to plant a seed inside of somebody else. And that is truly the way that I've been able to build my life, my business, my ministries to the ways that they've been today.
Yeah. So as I get out and I do public speaking, one of the things that I struggled with, especially early on, is I struggled with talking about myself. It was one thing to get up and just share information, but it was a whole different deal to be able to say, okay, what can I tell about myself in a story that's going to be able to engage people and to bring people in? So what's your approach with that? And do you help other people with that?
I had all these things. I would never tell anybody any of those things in the bio. I'm just me. I just show up, let God do what God's going to do. I'm going to be me, and it'll all work out. And I had this coach say, Devin, you know what? You're really prideful. It's not about, that's the opposite of pride. And they said, no, you're willing to stand in the way of allowing somebody else to be transformed by the things that you've done to give God the glory. You're willing to stand in the way of that. And that is pride. Come on. But it was true. If we don't share the things that we've accomplished because we said yes to our purpose, to our calling, to who we were created to be, then we're holding back. And so I got to recognize that the ways that I share things is, yeah, great. Here's all these things. Cool. But ultimately, like how we started off, it's about being a father inside. And I get to father all these people around me of helping them share their stories. And so it's being able to put myself and relive that moment of a story and be able to share it from that place of emotional intelligence, to be able to share it from a place of authenticity. So that way, when I tell it to you, you're actually visualizing the same thing that I am. We come into alignment, and that is the power of where stories become the most powerful, is when we're in the same moment, visualizing the same thing, being able to do that on stage, being able to do that on one-on-one conversations in person. And all of those take a different type of skill set to be able to share the stories.
Yeah. So do you feel like it is important to share not only just the successes and the adversities that you've had to overcome, but is it also important to talk about the failures as well?
Oh, 100%. Too many people are on social media, on stages, to be able to show how great and awesome they are. Nobody pictures themselves as perfect. And so if you present yourself as perfect all the time, you're missing the point of relating and drawing people in near to you. And so by sharing those failures, I was on a coaching call today, and I was just pouring out the struggles that I had in my first year. And it literally brought me back to tears of, I had built a 6-figure business super fast. And then all of a sudden I got this cease and desist letter 3 weeks before I went onto my first reality TV show as one of the #1 startups in the nation. And I go on the show and I can't even talk about my business because I have this letter that's hanging over my head, attorneys breathing down my throat. And it's, this could have been a failure. And it was a failure in the end, only because I rocked bottom for the next 6 months because I couldn't get out of that mindset, that spiral, until a coach said, Devin, snap out of it. People have to hear you. People have to see you. You got to get out of this. And there's people that are waiting to hear what's on the other side. And so sharing those vulnerable moments, being authentic, is 100% needed.
Do you feel like that there's a fine line there with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's John Maxwell that has a book called Failing Forward. We're all going to fail. We're all going to struggle. We're all going to go through the pits. It's going to happen. And so the point is, what do you do with it? Do you have accountability to pull you up? They allow you to wallow in it for 24 hours. Okay, you're done. Enough of the pity party, enough of this and that. You're allowed to feel those emotions, and that's okay because they're yours. But you're not allowed to stay there because it doesn't do you or anybody else around you any good.
Yeah. I feel like it's important that, especially if you're going to get up and talk and share these things, you've got to have kind of an equal balance between some of the failures versus the successes and being able to take people on a journey. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. When I first started out in the entrepreneurial world, I have being given 3 months left to live and going through a divorce and all the struggles of being broke and losing everything, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to get my son help. And so I would just spend probably 70% of my time talking about all those struggles, trying to get that ideal client, that person to feel what I was feeling. And then I'd spend 10% on where I'm at now and where I'm going. And then there was the offer. And my coaches would say, Devin, the reason why you're drawing so many broke and cycled and traumatic people all the time is because that's where you're spending all your time talking about. And so now it's okay, but now I want to paint a picture of what it will look like and allow them to be able to see that. So I like to just do really big bullet points and try and read the room of what's resonating with people. And then I go for the dream for them.
And I know that you talk to a variety of different audiences, and I always want to try to find that balance, being able to talk about my faith as well as being able to share my stories. What do you do to find that balance with your different audiences?
Yeah, anytime you're in a room, whether it be virtual or in person, you want to know what the ideal audience is, who's in there. But for the most part, I like to just feel that out and say, for some of you, this may be surprising, but this is my experience. And we all have our own experiences, and that's okay. There's one thing you can't ever take away from me, and that's my experiences. So you can disagree, you can agree. That's okay. You're going to have your perception, but this is what happened. And then I share about my miraculous encounter with Jesus and how he miraculously healed me. And so people are going to perceive anything that they want. And sometimes, depending if it's definitely not a faith-based, I'll even throw out there maybe for you, it's a higher power. Maybe for you, it's your purpose, your destiny. And so I try and lay it out so that they're able to fit in, because I don't want to judge them. I don't want to condemn people because they don't have the same faith as me. That's their choice, and they get to have that. We're going to move on.
I've gone through this period where, we've had a lot of challenges and struggles on the home side of things. And we've had a lot of things that we've had to work through over the last year. And to a certain degree, you feel like you're on a desert island. And so it's required a lot of work and effort to climb, what I feel like is climb out of that hole. What are some things that, or did you experience that when you were going through your struggles? And if so, how did you climb out of that hole?
Yeah. When I went through the struggles with my son, his name's Jacoby, he had some mental health. He's adopted, and he had some prior abuse and trauma before we had adopted him. I had him on my own for 5 years. And through that, we were doing aggression. He was having physical aggression. We were doing restraint holds like almost every day. And it wasn't safe for us to be around other people. Yeah. And so during that time, I spent $100,000 plus to get help, and nobody could help us. We lost all of our friends. My family wouldn't come and visit us anymore. And so I lost everything. Yeah. And the things that got me through were people that were able to still pour into me. So I was still reading my Bible. I was still praying. I was still worshiping, even when I didn't feel like it was doing anything. I knew the motions to do, and I was trying to find some way. When I teach on, we have this being able to hear the voice of God. We tune into different radio stations. What is the way that I'm hearing God? Reading your Bible, worship, listening to somebody. Is it somebody else? Is it through a still small voice? Whatever that can be. So I was trying to find this. And what happened was I found this YouTube channel with this guy named Eric Thomas, the motivational speaker, the hip hop preacher. Man, he just spoke so much life. And while I felt like it was still hyped type of thing, it was a hype that was really authentic to him. I could feel his passion. And that really got me through. And then when I had that opportunity to be able to share a stage with him, I was like, Eric, I just got to tell you, man, you got me through the pits of hell that I was in. And I got to share my story. And it was just an amazing moment to be able to kind of thank him for what he had brought me through. And I also think that there's points to where we get in this physical stuck, emotional stuck, a spiritual stuck. And in 2 Corinthians, it talks about going from glory to glory. We go from our purpose to purpose. We continually on a path. And so what I believe happens is we get stuck. It's what's that game? Fraud. So what I think happens is that we need to go back to that last place where we knew exactly what we were supposed to do. What was the last thing God told you? What was the last step that you were supposed to take in your business? What was the next thing you were supposed to do in your life? And relook and see if you need to get it realigned, because it's just like flying an airplane or a spaceship. You get 1 degree off, and you're going to China instead of Japan. You got a big shift going on there. And so it's an opportunity to recalibrate and realign with where you're supposed to be heading.
I went through a stage of listening to a lot of Eric Thomas as well. I cycled through different folks. I had my Eric Thomas phase as well, and really needed that positive uplift moment in time that I would listen to his stuff. But it's really awesome that you got to share a stage with him. It's rare that you get somebody that has been an influence on you that they didn't know they were an influence on you, and then be able to tell them about it later. Yeah. In all of this, whether it's through yourself and you've built up businesses through your entrepreneurship, I like to focus in on leadership. So kind of share some of your foundations of leadership. What did you start with? And how did that evolve?
Yeah. One of the most pivotal moments as a young person was when I grew up in the church. And I had this new youth pastor came into the church, and I was the center of attention for everything. I was always crawling underneath the pews. I was the class clown, playing hide and go seek in the piano, all those types of things. But he came in and he said, Devin, you are a leader. Do you know that? And I said, yeah. And he said, right now, do you know that you're leading more people to hell than you're leading people to heaven? And I said, I don't want to do that. But he was right. He said, you have a choice. You can lead people to good and in a good way, or you can lead people in a bad way. No. And whether you bring in the church aspect to it or not, doesn't matter. There's still a good and there's a bad. And so for me, it was like, man, I do have an influence on people. So when it comes to leadership, I get to recognize that. I think it's John Maxwell that says a leader is somebody that when you look behind you, there's somebody there. I'm like, oh snap, like I'm responsible for those people. Now, I'm not responsible for their actions, but like I'm accountable for what I show them, what I teach them, the example I live to them. And I began to take that on and like, wow, there's a responsibility. I got to step this up.
Yeah.
And so I started to grow in that and begin to dive into more John Maxwell stuff and begin to dive into leadership. I began to get heavy, and I dove into youth ministry and the social work. I could just feel so much, and the burden I was taking it on, we call it secondary trauma. Something was happening to them. I was feeling it so bad. And I had to learn of, they make their choices. I get to influence them, but they get to make the choice on how I influence them of what they're going to do with it. And so that was a big learning curve for me to be able to have. And the fact that I'm going to lead people, and no matter where I'm at, I'm always leading people. And social media is the same way. And so what I ended up coming down to was studying Jesus and what he did for leadership. And there's that influence circle, there's a leadership circle, whatever you want to call it, of your circle of influence. So you got your core people, and then there's different places and where people get to fit. And a lot of places tell you shouldn't categorize people, you shouldn't label people. We all do. Ultimately, we need to, because there's boundaries that need to be put into place. That was probably one of the best things that I could do, was to categorize people into where they're at in my circle, how much I open up to them, how much I pour into them. And even as I learned that, I got burnt and I got hurt so many times.
You're talking about John Maxwell. One of the first books that I read of his was Servant Leadership. And that for me was really important for it. And at the time that I read it, I had already been in the military and had led a couple different organizations by then. And it was eye-opening because there were some things that I was doing wrong. And a lot of it was what you alluded to. I was standing in my own way. And I was standing in the way of being able to help others better than what I was. And so it's funny you keep referencing John Maxwell, because I've also gone through his 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone back and used that as a reference for different things. And then you also talked about how leadership can be used for both good and bad. I just met with a consulting group that's looking at doing some subcontracting with me and bringing me on. And one of the things they asked me is what my perspective of leadership was. And when you have natural leaders, and people can naturally lead in a good direction, and you have people that will naturally lead in a bad direction, but they still have that ability, and it comes down to the ability to influence. So what has your approach evolved into to where you're at right now?
Yeah, I think what happened was I recognized the favor that was on my life through these stories. We, as entrepreneurs and business people, a lot of times we tend to want to go to where the money is. We tend to want to go to where there's things working well on the outside. And what I found was that I was losing my joy. I was losing my joy in chasing after these things. I created a 6-figure business in 48 hours off of one Facebook post. And then I had to go build it. After about 6 months of doing that, I'm like, I really hate this. This sucks. I got rid of it all. And I had to come back to a place of, where do I find the joy in my life? And ultimately, it kept on coming back to telling my story. I have to tell my story. And I learned how to be able to craft stories in ways that really drew people in. And then I started recognizing that the ways that I'm telling stories is the way that now people are catching it. They're starting to get seen. They're starting to get heard. They're starting to get paid. And when they're getting those things, it's, oh my gosh, I'm having fun doing this. I'm seeing great results. And I'm still having fun, and it's working. If I can help people tell their stories, and it's not just like a storytelling of, hey, let me tell you a story of like tomorrow or what happened today and craft it into a way to sell you something. That's not the purpose of this. It's to build relationship. And when you can build those relationships, I believe that it's better for you to have 10 friends that are sold out in relationship with you than having $1 million. Ask any pro athlete. You can blow through that $1 million in less than a year. Relationships that are willing to do anything with you, encourage you, challenge you, build you up, pick you up, kick you down, whatever you need to do, they'll support you all the way. You can build $10 million in that 1 year with half the effort.
I'm still trying to find my 10. I'm about halfway there.
Yeah. So it all comes down to 3 aspects for me that I started to build on. And it started off with social media, becoming bold and authentic on social media. And then it became to building relationships. What does it look like to have authentic relationships? Even willing to take a chance on somebody, even if they're going to burn you. Just because somebody burned you in the past doesn't mean that you don't give the next person a chance. They deserve a chance to be trusted just as much as the next person. And so social media, building relationships, and helping people get on the stages was really my sweet sauce of utilizing stories, those as your platforms of influence, and you can get out to the nations faster than any other way.
Do you have any advice for people? Because I know for me, I've been burned. I've been by people that never in a million years would I have ever thought that they would have done that to me. Do you have advice for people on how to get past that baggage, so to speak, because there's a little bit of a time there that it's an open wound, and then eventually you have to work through it. Do you have some advice for people of how to work through that?
Yeah, absolutely. Number one, men, it's okay to have emotions. It's okay to feel. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to cry. It's all right. And especially for men, and we're told to be men, suck it up. That stuff really just hurt. It made it worse. And for men, I believe that we're taught by society to shove it down. And I'm telling you, that's the absolute worst thing you can do, because you keep on shoving down and shoving down. What's going to happen when it's time to overflow? It's going to explode. And that's when all these things happen. And it's not really you that's overflowing in anger or abuse or narcissism, any of those. It's all the stuff that's been pressed down. And number one, feel those emotions in the time. The Bible talks about it. If somebody passes away or something happens, you're given 7 days to grieve. And so grieving is feeling the emotion that you're feeling, recognizing that it's there. And that's okay to do. The thing is that you can't allow that emotion to overtake you. You can't allow it to run you and make decisions for you. But it's okay to feel them. It's okay to process them and allow words to come out, even if they're not right. For me, at the beginning of my emotional journey and hurt and pain, especially with my ex-wife, when she had an affair, I walked in after a ministry trip, talk about going from a spiritual high to a I'm going to die type of thing. And I had a lot of hurt. And I recognized that I needed to process those things and not hold it against my emotions against her, but I needed to be able to allow myself to be free. The next girl I dated was probably, 3 years. But I recognized what had happened is that in my marriage and right after that, I had been so shut down on my emotions. She didn't want date night. She didn't want romance. She didn't want any of this stuff. And I didn't understand it, but my emotions were completely shut off. And then I go into this next relationship, and it's this amazing woman. And she's like, if you don't know how you feel, how am I supposed to know how you feel? If you're not upset, you should be upset. I feel like you're not telling me how you feel because you're hiding it. I'm like, I just don't know how to voice it. Like I haven't. So it went from one extreme to the next. And so what I learned was to practice. I know now that I'm an external processor. And so knowing yourself is very key to healing from those moments. What do you need in that moment? Voicing that to your accountability people, whether it be a spouse or a friend or whoever else it is, tell them what you want to do in this moment. Can you just listen to me? Hey, can you put on your coaching hat? Hey, can you put on your mother hat? Hey, can you just be a friend type of thing? Let them know, because sometimes, man, I would be so triggered by people just trying to fix it all the time and giving me their input. I think it's important that we recognize that we learn how to own our emotions and that it's okay to process them and to allow other people, they may not get it. One of the things with stories in this arena is never tell a story that you're not healed from.
Yeah.
And so it's important that if we're telling a story and there's still issues going on there, it's okay to gloss over some of those hurts and those pains for the time being. Because what I believe is a story is a seed that you plant inside of somebody else of transformation. If that seed has hurt, pain, emotional abuse, whether it be real or perceived, it doesn't matter. It's still there. You're planting that in there. There's all this ick. And so now you have this mixed up seed planted in somebody else. And so just being conscious of that as you're sharing stories and as you're processing through some of these things is that it's going to take time.
Yeah. That's one of the things that we have tried to raise and teach our children as they've grown up, is that it's okay to be upset. It's okay to have those emotions and to experience that. But you can't live there. And that's one of the things that even just recently, we lost a very close family member that it's been very traumatic for the family as a whole. But even still, we've had to coach our kids through and say, look, it's okay. It's okay that you're upset. It's okay that, that you're feeling what you're feeling. We just can't live there. And even still, because I'm very plugged into the veteran community, this is a huge topic because especially in the generation that I came through, the stuff that you do in the military, you don't talk about it. And that goes all the way back to, I was reading an article where there were some family members of a World War II vet that they didn't know half of what he had been through because he never talked about it. They ended up reading about it because somebody else did an article on it. And that was the first time they had ever even heard it. Even going all the way back to World War I, there was people coming back that they had experienced at the time, they called it shell shock. And it was common knowledge that when veterans would come back, they would abuse their families, they would abuse alcohol. And it was just not necessarily an accepted way of life, but it was just, this is just what happens. And even still, I know veterans that have come back from multiple tours. It's one thing to go through a single tour and have to deal with the trauma of that, but then going through multiple tours and seeing it over and over again, and then having to come home and be able to drive down the road without thinking about an IED or looking at a piece of trash, thinking that something bad's about to happen, and being able to unpack those emotions and then not knowing how to do it, and then not having the resources to be able to have somebody to guide them through that process. So this was kind of all the stuff that was going through my mind when you were talking about all that. And so it's extremely difficult for a lot of people to be able to get out of that process where they continue to live there. You meet people that they have gone through a trauma and that's where their maturity stopped. My wife and I know somebody that he had the severe trauma when he was 17 years old. He is in his 40s, but when you meet him, his mentality and his maturity level is still at 17 years old because he never got past it.
Have you ever heard of the book, The Body Keeps Score?
No, I have not heard of that.
Yeah, so there's this book called The Body Keeps Score. And The Body Keeps Score is all about what happens when trauma affects our body. And so trauma comes into our body and it affects the physicalness, the emotionalness. It affects all the way down to the cellular part of our bodies. Yeah. I suffered that and taking care of my son with all the aggression. And for 5 years, not sleeping, living in a hypervigilant state, being diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. They had compared me to a military person coming back because I had to be so aware at all times because my life depended on it. His life depended on it. And so what happened for me is that trauma got stuck in between my brain and my nervous system and it stopped communicating. It's like you were saying with him being stuck like at 17, our body gets trapped and encapsulated. One of the main things that I see that helps with that is going through a different type of process of different spots in our lives that we can integrate the different pieces or parts, they call them parts in the social work realm and in the counseling realm, the therapy realm, of who were you when you were 15? What happened when you were 15? And then integrate those different processes together. And when you bring a 15-year-old part that's healed, you bring a 21-year-old part that's healed, and then you bring them together to a 40-year-old man, it's wow, I have a whole new life. And that trauma is gone, and now you're brought into a wholeness of that. And so I think what you're saying is so spot on when it comes to leadership, when it comes to being authentic, when it comes to the approach that you take to circumstances that happen all around us. It's so important that we address it the right way. And if we can't, to recognize that those people that may have suffered some of those things. When I was training on trauma, we had this saying that this is a natural response to an unnatural situation. And so this is the way that they're responding to a situation that nobody has control of. And so let's figure out how we can be able to help manage this and help be able to not necessarily control it, but love them there. And one of the things with my son is people always wanted to put a Band-Aid over his behaviors. And so have you ever put a Band-Aid on the hair on your arm and then ripped it off? And that baby hurts. And what happens when there's a scab underneath that Band-Aid? You rip that scab right off. And you know that scab never comes back the exact same every time. And so the behaviors continue to change. And so we have to recognize that there's something underlying, and underneath that underlying trauma or issue or struggle, there's still a person. There's still
Yeah.
a soul. There's still a spirit of that person. And that's where we have to see them at, no matter how hard it gets.
One of the things that I've learned too is that we will resort back to what we know in the absence of any other information. And so if you experience trauma as a child from a parent, if you don't intentionally learn something new and a different way to do it, when you have kids, you're going to resort right back to, even though you hated every bit of it and you have swore that you would never do that to your kids, but if you don't replace it with something else, you're going to go right back to that and you're going to repeat the exact same things, and it turns into a generational curse. Same thing in leadership. It's interesting. You have these people that have this concept. I came up through the military, or I came up through athletics, and it was just natural for them to scream at us rather than, and so that's what I'm going to do too, rather than saying, is there a little bit better way?
Yeah. One of the things that a reason why I was so good at social work was because I was so good at putting myself in other people's situations.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a lot of times in the child abuse situations that I would work in and removing the children, I understood that the mom was truly doing the best that she could. Maybe she sold drugs. Maybe she sold her body. But you know what? The real reason why she said she was doing it was because she didn't have any money to feed her kids. She loved her kids so much that she was willing to do anything to take care of her kids. And that's the way that, like you said, that's the way that she grew up. She grew up with that mentality. And so then you have these professionals, these judges, these attorneys coming in and saying, you need to do this. They didn't know a single thing about what to be able to do to change, because it's just like you're speaking Japanese instead of English. No idea. And so I got to be able to bring in that different type of scenario and kind of shift it for both parties of saying, okay, so what's the first step that we can do here to be able to help this situation so we can get out of this generational curse type of thing? We called it the circle of life. There's always just circles and circles of things that would happen. Where, as the client, where as the person that's struggling in that generational thing, where do you want to be? A lot of times we put that perception on them. We think that you need to have a 9-to-5 and be making 50, 100 grand a year. And to them, they'd be like, I'd be happy with working at McDonald's. Okay, awesome. Let's start at McDonald's. So finding out where they wanted to be was really a huge step in helping them get the next help that they needed.
Yeah. And so are there principles that you take and that you've been able to use from both leading as a family and then and being able to take that across over into the business world? Or are there some commonalities there that you use that's been consistent for you?
Yeah, I love this question. I don't think that there's a whole lot different. And I know I stand on an island by myself sometimes with this philosophy, but I don't think there's a difference between your business. There's not a difference between your ministry, and there's not a difference between your life. Now, there's different things that you can do in each of those. Obviously, I would treat my children a little different than I would my assistant. But the way that I interact with them, the level of respect, just like the inner circle aspect of it, would be different. I obviously wouldn't share intimate things with my assistant that I would with my kids. Again, it comes back to that circle of influence. But the amount of honor that I show everybody as I travel and get people start to know more about who I am, I go places and people just flock. And it's just, bro, I'm a person. I'm a human being. And so there's these times to where I was like that with other people. I would recognize a star comes in, Willie Robertson walks on, and people are just like, I got to get a piece of Willie, got to get it, got to touch him. Just treat people like people. And so I think that when you treat everybody the same, and yes, there's honor, there's respect and ways that you do things in different avenues. But I truly believe that if you serve people, whether they're white, Black, whether they're a military, they're not, whether they're young, whether they're old, it doesn't matter. If you show up and you serve with the right heart, you will always go right. You will always go right. And I know a lot of people talk a lot about their mindset. That's so key to have the right mindset. But I like to take it one step deeper. It doesn't really matter what's in here if it's wrong in here. If you don't have the right heart set, your mindset doesn't matter. Because it's the motive of your mind that comes from the motive of your heart. And so if you have the wrong heart, you're blowing it. And that's where Jesus said that it's operating out of a place of love. Love is the most important thing. And so if you think of a thing, it's wrong. It's just like murder. But it ultimately comes down to, what is your motive in it? And I believe that if you go at it with the right motive, the right heart set, I've made a lot of mistakes. Yeah. This weekend, I spoke at a conference in North Carolina. I was a paid MC to be there, help run the event, make sure it went smoothly. MC's main job is to introduce the speakers. And these were big speakers. But I didn't really know them on a personal basis. And we didn't get to meet them beforehand. And I didn't have bios. So here I am as an MC going on stage, introducing people I'd never met. And I had to search on Google and ChatGPT for their bios.
Oh,
the first two I got wrong, way wrong.
wow.
And they let me know it. When I walked on stage at the very beginning, I had my orange jacket on. I was confident, but I let people know my heart. I poured out my heart for those first 5 minutes. When I messed up, everybody laughed. I got to laugh. I got to bring them up and say, hey, you know yourself better than I do. So how about you just tell us about you, and I'll stand here and pretend it was me. People just laughed, but it was giving myself and the people permission to say, you know what? If he can get paid and do that, I can't stand on stage and make jokes and mess up. And so people really got to know my heart, because my heart was set in the very beginning. So I think if we were to be able to do that in our motives and in our businesses, in our lives, with our families, and making sure we're going to mess up. Yeah, we're going to have bad days. But ultimately, there's grace when you have that heart set.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that came to mind during that segment. You talked about at the very beginning, people accumulate accolades and they do all these things, but it still comes down to what's in your heart. I've also seen it said that you can achieve all the success in the world, but what people will remember you by is how you treated them. And so I've seen that phrase before, and I was like, you know what? That's absolutely correct, because I've been a high school coach. I've been in education. I've been in business. It still came down to, it didn't matter what the venue was. It still came down to how I treated my people as to whether we were going to be successful or not. And the evidence of that is the number of people that I have come in contact with, and they're still in my life.
I love that saying. And I love to take it even one step deeper. It's what's the story that person is walking away with. So yes, it's the way that they treated you, but you're walking away with a narrative in your head of what happened at that conference, what happened to that conversation, how they treated you. You're walking away with a story. And so what is that story that you're walking away with? You have a key part in that, in having that. I think as parents, the best thing you can do is to apologize to your children when you make a mistake. Because you're setting the tone for what's acceptable for them. You expect them to do it, but then we never do it as parents. That's wrong. Same thing in a business. As a business leader, I apologize to some of my assistants when I make the mistake. In a relationship, I apologize. I have no problem apologizing when I have a mistake.
Recently, because I've talked about, we've had our own sense of struggles, and I went through this period where I felt like I needed to just get things off my chest, clear the air, whether I really needed to or not. I just felt like I needed to. And one of the things that I did is I sent each one of my children individually a message and said, I have not been the best parent. I have not been the perfect parent. I have made more than my fair share of mistakes. And all I can ask is that you forgive me for the mistakes that I made. It was interesting, the response that I got, because I had a couple of my kids that immediately called me because I thought I was going to commit suicide or something. And I was like, no, I just needed to get some things off my chest and felt like I just needed to clear my soul. And it was part of that effort of me just trying to reconnect and try to get off that desert island. And for some people, I've also taught my kids this as well, is that there's this thing I call social schizophrenia. You're one way at home, you're another way at church, you're another way at work. And so you have all these different personalities that you start to juggle instead of just being the same person, no matter what the venue is and who you're around. And that way you don't have to remember who you are around certain people. That, to me, that's not healthy, and that's not genuine as to who you are as an individual when you do that.
Yeah, I would say that the number one thing that the enemy tries to do when we're struggling is to put us on an island by ourselves, is to distract us, is to give us these voices in our heads of all the things that maybe we've ever done wrong, and bring them all up. And I also believe that a lot of times it's our own selves we want to just be alone. And we know that the right thing to do is to reach out and to be able to have those conversations. And I notice for me, when I start to struggle or start to downward spiral, I immediately go to the instant messages on Facebook and I start encouraging anybody and everybody on my list. I just say, hey, I hope you're having a great day. Hey, I just wanted to check in and see how things are going. Why? Yeah. Because I'm getting my emotions up and going. I'm blessing other people. And I know that's going to get my emotions stirring. And I'm going to be able to stir some things out. And I'm not isolating myself to a place to where that spiral can get really bad and really quick. And I also think that sharing those things, blessing other people like your children, being authentic and being vulnerable. I remember my dad, he passed away probably 5 years ago, but probably about 10 years ago, I remember we were sitting at a campground. We were sitting at a picnic table. He was on the side with the sun. I was with my back to the sun. And he sat down, he had his Bible on his hand, or his hands on the Bible. And he said, we were talking about, because I was walking in signs, wonders, and miracles and prophesying and all these things. And he didn't really understand any of that. And so we were going to sit down and talk about that. And he said, before we talk about this, I just need to tell you that there's been a lot of times I've made mistakes as a dad. I haven't treated your mom all the time. And there's been things behind the scenes that you kids didn't even know. And I just wanted to apologize. And it's never left me. I had the whole visual, everything. I knew the exact moment. Yeah. But those are moments that your children will never forget. And dude, just kudos to you for doing that and for sharing that. And I know that some of your listeners are going to be thinking about, man, I got some baggage that I need to let out. And that's the healthiest thing you can do, is when it's the right time and the right place, and let that go and allow it to have a time for a conversation to happen, to where there may need to be processing of what gets to happen and what had happened.
Have you, because I know I've experienced this, where people that you really have wanted to try to reconcile things with, or at least be able to say, hey, you know what? This may not fix the relationship, but I would at least want to be able to get these things off my chest. But they don't even hear you. They won't even answer the phone. They won't. And I have, unfortunately, have had some of those people in my life. There won't be any reconciliation because they won't allow it.
The first one that comes to my mind was a spiritual father, leader to me. We traveled the world together doing ministry and speaking and pouring into people. And that was when I moved from where my kids were to where I'm at now, and to be in life with him and his family. But what they didn't recognize was that I was telling them about my son and the struggles we were having. Me telling them the story was different than them living it out themselves. And so as they began to experience the aggression and the outbursts and the struggles that my son was having, they began to push me away a little bit. And then they blamed me for when I was given 3 months left to live and had to go stay at a friend's house to be taken care of, for not communicating with them. And he was really hurt. And they started to badmouth me in the congregation, but nobody would reach out to me. Not a single person reached out. Once in a while, I'd get a message and the person would say, hey, we were talking about you in a prayer meeting and we just wanted to say, is everything all right? And I said, why didn't anybody reach out? And they're like, nobody really knew where you're at. I still have a phone and you still could reach out. I'm dying. Like, I was literally in bed 18 out of 24 hours. I'm sorry I didn't reach out to you in the middle of my convulsive shakes that I would have all the time. And I would try and reconcile with him for the next almost year, sending him messages, trying to call on the phone, showing up at his house. And he would not have a conversation with me. And it hurt to the core, because this is somebody that I look to as a father figure. But he was so hurt. He felt like he was abandoned by me, to where in reality, he didn't know the situation that I was in, because he didn't reciprocate the relationship in that moment when I needed it the most. And while I was able to forgive and to be able to move on, I didn't forget. And I think that's something that we get to remember, is that God forgives and forgets. In the Psalms, it says that he throws all of our sins in the sea of forgetfulness. He forgets. It's gone. It's forgiven. But us, I don't believe that we're supposed to forget. I believe we're supposed to forgive. But if we forget, that means it could happen again. And so I believe that as we're driving down the road, we do have a rear view mirror. And while we don't always look in that rear view mirror and focus on what's behind us, we do need to glance up and say, oh, yep, I remember that time that person hurt me. Oh, here's the red flag. I see it again. Oh, this relationship, something feels off. If we forgot about those things, we would continue to do it over and over again. So I believe that can help us in future relationships with people around us.
I know for me, if I were to go back and try to find every person that I felt like I owed an apology to, I don't know that I'd ever find everybody just because I made mistakes. And when I've had the opportunity to try to own up to those mistakes and try to at least circle back around and say, you know what, I'm sorry that happened. And the person that I am now is not the person that I was. And it is part of a journey. It is part of a process that we all go through. It's part of a maturity, both as people, but also from my perspective, and I'm sure yours as well, as children of God, we go through processes. And it's what I refer to as going around the block. You're going to keep encountering the same situation over and over again. And you're going to keep going around that block until you finally learn your lesson. And then you get to move to the next one. And then those lessons create a foundation for more lessons as you move up. And from my analogy to that is this is how God builds his temple within us, because we're accumulating all these blocks through the processes that we go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do believe that there may be a time and a place to where those memories, asking for forgiveness, can come back again. But sometimes it's more important to release it, just us and God, than it is to try and think about. And there was a point in my life to where I was seeking after healing. I wanted to be fixed. I wanted to be perfect. And that became my crutch, is I was always trying to find something wrong with me. And I was traveling with a pretty well-known leader, and he had hurt me in some of the things that he said and how he approached some things. I was in my mid-20s, so I was a kid, and I just didn't handle it well. I didn't bash him. I was just done. I cut it all off, and I left, and he was hurt. And it was almost 10 years later that I woke up one morning and I immediately just felt it. I was like, I need to apologize to him. And so I shot him a message, and it was a voice message. And I said, hey, I don't expect you to respond to this. I don't even know if this is still your same number, because people change their numbers, especially well-known people. And I just said, this just came to my heart, that I'm really sorry for the way that I treated you. I was very immature. I've grown. I've healed so much. And while I know things won't ever be the way that they used to be, I feel like God is telling me to apologize to you for the way that I treated you. Yeah. And within 5 minutes, I had a response. And he said, I actually had a dream about you this morning. And I was praying for you, that God would still be using you in the way that he created you to, and that I missed you. And so the fact that you reached out to me shows the maturity that you have and the maturity that you've done in those moments. And he's honestly, I haven't really thought about it. It happened, and it's happened a number of times in my life. I honor that and respect that you reached out. And so I do believe that there's times to where something will pop into your head, something will pop into your heart, and you're like, where in the world did that come from? I challenge you to think about that, to pray about that. Am I supposed to do something with this? I know that we're coming close to the end, but I think that there's a lot of times we focus on this word triggers, especially military and social work, all these things, trauma and as a whole. I want to challenge people that I don't believe that triggers are necessarily always a bad thing. And I had to be challenged by that, because being in social work, everything's a trigger. And we're always talking about triggers and trauma and all that. But I was going through counseling myself. And the counselor said, hold on just a second. She stood up, she walked by the door, and she said, wait, did you say something? And I said, no. And I turned back around, and she slammed the door shut. And I jumped. I said, what was that for? And she said, oh, did I scare you? And I'm like, yeah, why did you slam the door? And she's, how do you feel? And I said, it just startled me. I'm not like scared or nothing's like wrong. And she's, oh, so what happened is you had a trigger. Your emotion, your body was triggered by that sound. And so you jumped. Is that a bad thing? And I said, no. And what I want to challenge you with is that sometimes when there's triggers that happen to you, it's actually your body saying that this is a spot that needs to be healed. And so when there are those trigger moments, whether it be in your family, in your business, or whatever, you recognize it. You can feel something's physiologically different in your body. Okay, what is that? And what can I do? Sometimes we have to compartmentalize it and take it to a different place. Move on and come back to it. Sometimes we need to process it right then and there. But I do believe that trigger can be a finger of saying, yep, here's the thing we need to work on right now.
Yeah. One of the things that I had to learn too is that when you go and you offer up forgiveness or even ask for that forgiveness, you don't always get the response back that you're hoping for. And what I had to learn is not to derive my comfort and my self-worth based off of that response. And it was more about my heart in the situation, making sure that not only have I forgiven myself, but I have forgiven them. And then my asking for forgiveness was with the right intent. And having to be able to walk away and be content with that, because you're not always going to get the response that you hope for.
One of the things that I learned after I went through my divorce and people started saying, you'll never be in ministry again, you're divorced, you'll never be in leadership, all this stuff. And I was like, God, like, I've given everything for this. Why would you never allow me to do this again? And he said, who told you that you'd never be in leadership again? Who told you that you were divorced and that label was put on you? And he said, but I don't see you that way. And he said, you don't get your identity from the creation. You get your identity from the creator. And so recognizing that people are going to have their perceptions, people are going to be able to react and respond the way that they want to. But we ultimately, again, know our heart set and what our heart is behind it. And in that moment and in the future, we get to recognize, okay, this is who I truly am. Yeah, I'm changed from when I was before. I'm sorry if you don't see that. I'm sorry if you don't believe that. That's okay. But I will not allow your perception of me to identify my identity. I am going to be who I am called to be, and nobody else around me is allowed to put anything else on me except for that.
No. We're getting down to the end. I try to be respectful of your time, and I really do appreciate you coming on and being able to share and visit with me. I felt like this has been an awesome conversation. Whenever you have a chance to come down to Dallas, or I can come up to your neck of the woods, we need to just sit down with a cup of coffee and just let the conversation go, because I feel like we could visit for a long time.
I agree.
So if you would, go ahead and tell everybody what you can do for them and how to get a hold of you and all those great things.
Yeah, absolutely. Number one way to get a hold of me is straight on Facebook, Devin Schubert. You'll see me with my orange jacket. Everything is orange for me. And I'd love to, if you followed me, shoot me a message. We can have a conversation as well. The other thing that I love to be able to do is help people tell stories. And so I really feel like it's important that you learn how to tell your story, learn how to tell it effectively so that you can be seen, you can be heard, you can be paid. And so what I've put together is our Stories to Stages. I'm on a mission to help 1 million people share their stories across media. And in order to do that, I put together a curriculum. It's a challenge. It's a boot camp to where you're able to learn how to tell your story, craft your story, share it across all different platforms. You then record your story on our app. You send it to us. My team will publish it. They will professionally edit it, and then they'll put it out on all social media platforms for you. And so you can get your story out there. Again, your story is a seed of transformation planted inside of somebody else. And so what would happen if 1 million people planted those seeds? There would be over 1 billion people affected by that. And I'd love for you to be able to do that. And you can do that at storiestostages.com. And you can utilize podcast 1 as the coupon code, and you can get it there.
Awesome. And I've also had, going across your screen, I've had your website there at the bottom as well. So I hope that I get to be able to jokingly grow up and be just like you, because you've shared some stages with people that I would love to be able to step on a stage with at some point in time. And I hope it happens for me. But definitely kudos for you. And I'm glad that you have had those experiences that you can now share and help other people achieve those dreams.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been an enjoyable time, and it's been great just to be able to kick back and relax and have conversation.
Absolutely. And thank you again for all of you that have tuned in. And until next time, this is your host, Dr. Davis McAlister, with The Approach.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Approach. Please hit that like button and subscribe for the latest episodes. If you would like to be a guest or would like for Dr. McAlister to speak at your business or event, you can email him at info@drdavismcallister.com. You can also go to his website at drdavismcallister.com.